Welcome to this talk titled From Spring Boot 2 to Spring Boot 3. In the program it says with Java 21 and Jakarta EE. I'll actually use Java 22, but I hope that's okay. My name is Ivar Grimstad, and I'm the Jakarta EE developer advocate at Eclipse Foundation. And if you want to connect to me with on social media afterwards or during the talk, please use my coordinates here. I'm a Java champion. I'm a Apache NetBeans committer. I run a local Java use group in Malmö in Sweden. And obviously I'm involved with Jakarta EE at the Eclipse Foundation. So, before I go into the Spring Boot part of this talk, I'll just give you a little introduction to what Jakarta EE is about, and then I'll tie it into why it's important for Spring. And the latest release of Jakarta EE is Jakarta EE 10. And that has been out there for a little bit more than a year. And that's the Jakarta EE 10 is the current, as I said, the current release. We're just about to release a Jakarta EE 11 in a couple of months. And when we talk about Jakarta EE, we talk about specifications. As opposed to with Spring Framework, where you talk about the framework. So the difference between a specification and a framework is that we specify an API, but we don't necessarily provide an implementation for it. That is up to implementers to provide. And when we look at a specification at the Eclipse Foundation or anywhere else, it's usually a textual description of a piece of technology, like a human-readable document. It's an API artifact that is available in Maven Central that we as developers use when we do the coding. And there's also a test compatibility kit, or a TCK, that is a suite of tests that test if an implementation implements this specification and fulfills all the requirements specified in the document and by the API. And when it passes the TCK, it is a compatible implementation. And we need at least one compatible implementation to ratify a specification as a final specification, and that has to be an open source one. From there on, it can be any license, but it has to be at least one open source implementation. So Jakarta EE 10 platform is a lot of specifications, and all the blue ones here are the ones that were updated for Jakarta EE 10 from 9. And as you see, that's most of them. The gray ones weren't updated. Some of them are stable. Some of them will be updated later. And there is one new specification down in the corner called CDI Lite. And I'll get into that in a minute. So if we peel away the more enterprisey specifications, we're left with a subset that is called the web profile. And the web profile is more a traditional web application. That's where you create a UI and have some persistence and then some security and stuff around it. But it's not necessarily all the integration things with enterprises as you would have in the platform. And if you peel away all the UI parts of this, we're left with this stack of specifications that we call the core profile. And the Jakarta EE 10 core profile is the first time we introduced a new profile in Jakarta EE since Java EE 6 when web profile was introduced. And the thought about the core profile is that's the minimum set of specifications you would need to create a REST endpoint or a RESTful web service or a microservice. And this is where CDI comes in, because CDI allows us to resolve all the dynamic features of CDI that is usually done when you start up your application, but do it at compile time so we can compile to native with GraalVM if you need to. So a core profile compatible implementation will allow to use a GraalVM. And Jakarta EE 10 is based on Java SE 11, so all the APIs work with 11 and above. We verified with the TCK that it runs on 11 and 17. It also runs on 21, as you'll see, or not in this demo, but it will run on 21. It will most likely run on 22 as well, but we verified on 11 and 17. So developers can use 17 and above features if you like. So how is this relevant to Spring? Well, In order to answer that question, we have to back to the previous release of Jakarta EE, and that was Jakarta EE 9, and that was released like 3.5 years ago. And what the major thing of this release was the change from javax to Jakarta of our namespaces. And that's what most of this talk is about. And it turns out that Spring very much builds on top of Jakarta EE. And Spring Boot 3 raised this baseline from Jakarta EE8 to Jakarta EE9. And that's where the namespace came in. So if you're doing an upgrade from Spring Boot 2 to Spring Boot 3, you'll notice that a lot of your code get the compilation errors because you have a lot of javax stuff. And that's all Jakarta EE. So how many Spring developers in the room? Most of it, yeah, okay. How many Jakarta EE developers? Not that many. So by the end of this talk, all of you will raise your hand if you were Spring developers, because if you'll see here that you're actually Jakarta EE developers if you use Spring, because it builds on Jakarta EE, a lot of it. So I'll go through a couple of them. So who's here are using or heard of Jakarta persistence? Okay, if I say JPA, if I say Hibernate, yeah, so Hibernate is an implementation of Jakarta persistence. So if you're using Hibernate, you're using Jakarta persistence, and you can raise your hand when you're asked if you're a Jakarta EE developer. And in Jakarta EE 10, we introduced UIDs as basic Java types. And that means that you don't have to do the mapping between UIDs and strings as previously. So if you're using the latest version of Spring Boot, you get the latest version of Hibernate, which implements the latest version of Jakarta EE, and you get this code for free. So in your Spring application, you can do this if you want to, because that's Jakarta persistence, and it comes with Jakarta EE 10. And even though Spring Boot 3 has a baseline of Jakarta EE 9, they drag in a Hibernate version that actually implements Jakarta EE 10. So the next one, bean validation. Anybody using bean validation here? It's actually called Jakarta validation now. So Hibernate Validator is an implementation of Jakarta validation, or bean validation, as it used to be called. And Hibernate is dragged in by Spring. So if you have any @valid, @notnull, or that kind of annotations in your code, that's Jakarta validation. So you're using that, you're a Jakarta EE developer. The last one, I promise. Servlets. Anybody using servlets? Well, you've noticed when you start up Spring Boot, it says starting service Tomcat, starting servlet engine. So if you're using Spring Boot, you're using servlets. Everything in Spring is based on servlets. So that's maybe the tightest integration you have between Jakarta EE and Spring is the servlet specification. And that's Jakarta servlet. And you get Tomcat 10 here. And Tomcat 10 is on Jakarta EE 10. And you can always change your servlet engine from Tomcat and use Jetty or Undertow or OpenLiberty or something else. But it's still servlet engines, and you're using Jakarta servlets, and you can interact with the servlet specification. And there are actually more. This is the Jakarta EE 11 platform, which is going to be alive in July. And I'm guessing that later versions of Spring will pick up these specifications and these versions of the specifications. I've omitted the versions here. If I just say, okay, everything here is Jakarta EE, and I'll lay Spring over and see where is Spring and Jakarta EE has dependencies between each other. So you can see all the green ones here are the ones that Spring in some way or the other are using directly or indirectly of the Jakarta EE platform. And you see it's about half of it. So this is how tightly coupled and how much Spring builds on Jakarta EE. So let's let the code talk. So what if I want to create a new Spring application? And I go to Start Spring.io, and I click New Application. And I'm kind of old school, so I don't want the jar deployment thing. I want a war. And you can do that with Spring Boot. So I create my new Spring Boot application, And I asked my friend in the basement who handles the servers to deploy this new application on the Tomcat cluster he's maintaining. And he's running Tomcat 9 there. So how would this work? Well, it will actually work pretty fine. You won't get any error messages. But the application won't do anything either, because it's relying on javax servlets in Tomcat 9. But Spring Boot 3 are using Jakarta servlets. So it won't discover the servlet, and it won't do anything. So what you need to do is to ask your friend in the basement to install Tomcat 10, and then it will work. But most of us are not doing this old school war thing. We're doing the jar-based deployments, and we're using the Spring Boot jars. So if I want to upgrade a Spring Boot application from Spring Boot 2 to Spring Boot 3, so I have my application, and let's look at this application first. So what I have here is an application called Duke Boot. It's a Spring Boot 2.7.8, which is not the latest version into Spring, but it's usually there we start when we do the upgrades. It's on Java 17. I have a couple of dependencies here, but nothing more. So it's a very simple application. If we look at the code, it's my Spring Boot application, and it just starts it. So there's nothing weird going on. And I have a REST controller that is using an account repository here. And I'm having a post method where I can send in a user. And from this user, I create an account where I grab the email from that user I sent in. And I store that in the database. And then just print and say, this is OK. And I also have this get method where I can just list all the users in my database. And this is an in-memory database, so every time I restart it, it will go away. So this is how the application looks like. So what I want to do is to take this application here and move it over to Spring Boot 3. So how do I do that? Well, that should be very easy, shouldn't it? So I just go to my POM file. I'll figure out the Spring version here, and I upgrade it to 3. What is 2.4? Is that the latest one? So I upgrade it like this. And what happens then? I get a compilation error. So that's what's happening first. And that's because of the Jakarta EE9 baseline, right? So I start to see those compilation errors. This one was just one, but it was simple. So how do I fix this? Well, I can use the IDE. And I'm using IntelliJ here. And it has this migration in the refactoring called Java EE to Jakarta EE. I know the name is very bad. It should be Jakarta EE9 to something above, or to Jakarta EE9 and above. And it may be kind of hurtful for a Spring developer to click on something called Java EE in the IDE. I understand that. But you just need to get dirty, you know? You just need to, even though it maybe close your eyes and then just press it, and you'll see it does amazing things for you. I'll demo it later. You can also use Open Rewrite, which you can use as a Maven plugin, or a command line tool, or hook in your CI system. And it has recipes for everything. It has recipes for Spring. In this talk, I'll only be talking about the Jakarta EE effect of the Spring migration. But there are recipes there that handles all the Spring stuff, the security things they mixed up in the migration there. But you can also create your own recipes for your company that is suited for your microservices. Or you can look at the Jakarta recipes. They actually do a lot of things for you. They're not enough for the entire Spring migration, but it may be enough for some of their services. You can also do it manually, and I've started doing this, and that is up to the Spring version. If I have any Jakarta EE versions, you want to fix those as well, and then fix the imports. And in this case, I'll actually do it manually. And here you can see it's only this at valid annotation. So this is very easy. I just take the javax and replace by Jakarta, and it works. So that was easy. So I should be able to just compile this. You can see I'm running Java 22. So I'll just package this one. That should be fairly straightforward to do this migration. I don't know what the fuss is about, but oh, it failed. So what's going on here? Well, it turns out that there are some tests failing somewhere. And I don't know, who's writing tests? Yeah. So I don't, and I'm a little, but it turns out that Spring helps me with this, because when you use start Spring IO, you get some tests, and this test is fairly simple. It just loads the context, and that's enough for this to fail. It compiled, right? You usually compile, that's good, and then go to production. But this test actually tests to load the Spring context, and it fails. So why is that? It turns out that I have some dependencies in my application. Who has dependencies in their applications? Yeah, so I know it's a hassle, but yeah, I have a dependency in my application, and so my application has this dependency called dukdep, and let's look at this one. So we can see here I mean the easy way of fixing this. Right, that would be just uncomment this test. So, and that's usually what we do. But the other way that your customers probably would prefer is to look a little bit deeper. And you can see I have this dukdep dependency here. And this dukdep dependency is the one that has this account stuff. So the account repository and the account class. And I have dukdep here, and we can look at this one, and you can see it has the account class. And what I can see here is also that this one is on an old Spring Boot version. So that happens when the application starts to load this test context in the test. It loads these, and it fails. Because my application, I need to migrate those dependencies over as well. So if I have any dependencies that rely on previous Spring Boot versions, I need to fix them over as well. And in this case, I have the source code for this dependency, so it's fairly simple. So let's just do this. So as you see, it's Spring Boot 278, and I would recommend to use the same Spring version as you do in your application. So it's kind of the same everywhere. What we can also notice here is that there are some, and this is not necessarily very usual, but sometimes you have some Jakarta dependencies in your dependency. It may be any reason. It may be that I didn't even have a Spring dependency. It was just Jakarta dependencies. Right? If the account class is just Jakarta stuff. So this is using Jakarta Persistence API version 2, which is part of Jakarta EE8. So we need to move this past 9 at least. And in this case, you can look at the Jakarta EE web page and see which versions are good. In this case, where we have Spring, we can actually remove these dependencies and just rely on what we get from the Spring. But since we don't really know this code, we'll just update this one to version 3.1.0. And this one also to 3.0. Let me see if I can get some help. 3.0. I think there's one too. So you can find this version on the Jakarta.ee webpage if you're wondering which ones. So when I've done that, you'll see that I get a lot of compilation errors. So it's all over the place, and this is because I upgraded the Spring version. And these are way too many for me to do manually. So let's do the IDE thing. So I click the refactor, and migrate packages and classes, and under here you see the Java EE to Jakarta EE. So I know this is the hard step for US Spring developers. You have to use a Jakarta EE menu item in the IDE. But you just have to do it because it will actually help you. So this is where you have to just overcome your fears and click it. It's like, should I invite Dracula in or not? You know, but in this case, you can because you have a lot of garlic in your house. So I'm just going to do this dependency project. You can do all of it, and what you'll see here is that it does what you expect it to do. It changes all the imports, and this will do all the projects, everything where you run it. So it's very simple if you want to do it in the IDE to do it this way. So I should be good then. What I need to do now is also take this Duke dependency and re-release it so I can use it in my application. And I'll just bump the version to version 2. What you can do here is also use a classifier to say that this is version 1.0, but it's migrated, so use the Jakarta EE classifier or something. That's totally up to you and your company policy, but I'll just bump the version number for simplicity. And then I need to install it in my Maven repository, because if I look here, you can see I have the Duke dep. I only have version 1.0 in my Maven repository. So I'll install this one here, Maven clean install. So there you go. And if I now list it, you'll see I have version 2.0 in my Maven repository. And I can now go to the Duke boot application and consume this dependency. And when I've done that, I can build this one. Package, there we go. And now the test passes. So now I've migrated this one over. So let's run it. When the test works, it works. So I just realized that I forgot to actually run this application for you before I started this migration. So, so you'll see that the first time now. But this is how. What it does is as you saw, it inserts stuff in the database, and let's do that. So I'll run it. Just post with the email equals dukes.com, and put it in my database. And you see, I'm a server-side developer, and we like red log messages. So user is valid is actually a good message. And you can see it's created here at the bottom, created with ID 1. I can query this one with get users, and you can see I have Duke at dukes.com in the database. So what if I put it in an email that is not valid? So if you remember from this one, I have this @valid, so it will validate this user object for me. So what if I add a non-valid email, and it says red, yeah, good, user is valid, it's created, and if I list it, you see I have no crap in my database. So there's something weird going on here. And it turns out that, well, so what I've done so far to get there is I took this Duke dependency, migrated it over to version 2.0, run it on Spring Boot 3, and the steps I did was I updated the Spring version in POM, I updated the Jakarta EE versions where I had one, I fixed the imports, and I repeated for the dependencies. And it turns out that this application actually has transitive dependencies. Anybody has transitive dependencies? Yeah. They're fun. So the transitive dependency I have here is this user class is in this, you can see Duke's lib. And Duke's lib is something that there's a Duke dependency drags in, but I don't have the source code for this one. So what I can do is to just look at it, and you can see it has this add email that isn't activated. And that's because it's relying on some old stuff, and it's the javax validation. But I don't have the source code for this one. So the scenario I have here is I have this Spring Boot application with the DukeDep that has a dependency, transitive dependency on dukelib, and I have to get the dukelib over as well, but I don't have the source code available. Anybody have this problem? Yes? Okay, so there are several ways I can do this. So yeah, I have the source code for DukeDep, and I don't have the source code for dukelib. And the reason why you may miss the source code for a dependency can be many of. I mean, those of us who has been in this game a while back when we were used to commit code, if we had a version control, it would be maybe Subversion or source safe, visual source safe on a desktop computer on one of the developers under the desk. Or we use Subversion, and nobody here knows how to use Subversion because everybody's using Git these days. Or you lost it, or it's in a library that you have bought and don't have the source code. It's a company that went bankrupt. It can be an open source library. It can be any reason why you don't have these the source for a dependency. So what do we do? Luckily, there is a tool called transformation, or there are several tools. But a tech called transformation. And transformation is taking the bytecode and just transforming the namespaces for you. And there are a couple of tools that we developed around the Jakarta EE9 era, and that is the Eclipse Transformer and the Apache Tomcat migration tool. And both these tools will take a jar or war or whatever stuff you have, your dependency, and take the bytecode and translate the namespace for you. And in this demo, I'll use the Eclipse Transformer. You can download it from the GitHub. It's a jar file, but it can also be used as a Maven plugin. So you can hook it into your CI and use it whenever you run your build, or you can just do it once, like I'll do now. And I have the tool here is under my, let me see if I can find it, development tools. I've downloaded these two jars, the Jakarta EE migration 107 shaded jar, that's the Apache Tomcat migration tool, and the org Eclipse Transformer CLI 050 jar is the Eclipse Transformer. So I'll use the Eclipse Transformer for this one. And the first thing I'm going to do is just copy the jar from my Maven repository and into this folder, so I can just manipulate it here. So I'll copy the dukelib jar from my Maven repository. Like if I just list this one, you can see I have a two that I haven't cleaned up. I'll just dukelib. Sorry. I'll just delete this one. So I have the version 1.0 of this jar. So you can see I'm not cheating. So I'll copy it here. So I have this, I'll go to the temp folder and copy it there. So I'll just copy this jar here. So I have the dukelib 1.0 jar in my temp folder. Then I'll run the migration tool on this one. And this is run with the java jar, and I'll just use the transformer CLI jar. And then the input parameter is this library. As I said, it's also available as a Maven plugin or Gradle plugin or any other way of doing it. But this is simple command line stuff. So I'll just run it. It does some changes there, and you can see I have the dukelib and the output dukelib. That's the default name. I could give it another name if I wanted, but I'll just keep this name for now. And if I look at these two and just compare them, you can see that the dukelib here has the import javax validation, whereas the output duke has import Jakarta validation. So it fixes the imports for you in the bytecode. So you don't have to decompile it and fix it and package it again. It just does it within the jar file for you. And that's, now it's just one line, but it could be much of it, and it could be obfuscated and everything. So this is sort of a fairly fast way of fixing your dependencies. So, and the next thing I have to do is to deploy this one to my Maven repository so that I can consume it from my application. And I'll just use the local Maven repository here, but if you have a company nexus or something, you can put it there. I would be careful putting it out on Maven Central, though, because you don't really know where it came from and who owns it and stuff. So you want to keep it kind of in your within the bounds of your company, unless your company owns it yourself, and you can put it on. So I'll just install it by using the install file Maven command, and I use the output file, and I give it the same group ID and artifact ID, and I bump the version to version 2.0. Here also you can use a classifier if you want. So I have to go down there and run it from a Maven folder. So now I've a version 2.0 in my Maven repository. So the next step then is that I can consume this from the Duke dependency. So the Duke dependency are now using the version 2.0 of this Duke lib. And since this is kind of a chain of dependencies, I first have to also re-release my Duke dependency, which are using the Duke lib, in order to use it from my Duke boot application. So I have to do this, install this one again, and then I have to rebuild my application. So just rebuild this one. So now it drags in the new Duke lib library, and then I'll run the application, and then I'll just clean here. First query, you can see I have nothing in database, so it's cleared every time I restart it. I'll insert the Duke email read, that's good. So let's see, it has Duke in the database. Let's insert the faulty Duke again, and it says bad request. So now the validation actually works, and I don't have crap in my database anymore, and it's only created one. So that's how you fix transitive dependencies. So what I did was re-release this Duke lib as a version 2.0, and I can run my application again. So the list gets longer. So far I'm updating the Spring version in the POM. I'm updating the Jakarta EE versions if I have any. Then I'm fixing the imports. You can use the tools, open rewrite or anything. I repeat for dependencies, and I transfer libraries if necessary. There may be some additional steps, and this is more dependent on how your application is. And I mean, we developers do all kinds of weird things, so you never know what you find. But in your application, very likely, if you're using very much of, for example, Hibernate, you may have some properties for Hibernate that are prefixed with javax. It could be javax caching strategy or something. And these properties also have to be renamed to Jakarta caching property, or etc. So if you find any of these properties in your application, you may have to rename those as well, because they are also affected by the namespace change. You may also build things dynamically, like build these property strings dynamically. So that, and they're harder to find because you can't search and replace. You actually have to read the code. And you may have drag things from the database and properties here and there, so it can be any kinds of weird dynamic ways of building these properties or doing reflection or other things. That is kind of application specific of what you're doing. All right, who's using Java 22? It's been out for a week. There is nothing wrong. 21 then, or 17. Yeah. So, are you in 11? Yeah. No, so I'll show some 22. Or actually, I'm lying. Let's do two things. First of all, I'll upgrade to 22. So I'm using 17. So I'll upgrade to 22. But I won't stop there. I want to use preview features. And there is actually, we are kind of hung up on these LTS things, and that's a business thing. There is nothing quality difference between any Java releases. So 22 is just as good as 21. It's actually better. It's just you won't have support for 2 or 3 years. But who's on 22 in 3 years? We're on 25 then, since forever. So you can always trust the latest Java release. They're just as good quality-wise as the others. It's just you can't buy support as long for them. That also goes for preview features. Everything that goes into the JDK are tested. The only thing with preview features is that they can change or go away. So then you may have to upgrade to the next version. But we want to upgrade anyway. So I'll just enable preview here. And the reason why I want to do it here is that if you do enable preview in a Spring application, I don't know if they've fixed it in the latest version, but you know these tests that some people write? If you want those tests to run as well, you have to enable preview for the Surefire plugin. So this is a trick if you're using preview features in the application. You have to enable them in Surefire as well. Okay, so now we're on 22. I want to do two things. So one thing I want to do is show you that you can use Jakarta EE10 here as well. So you remember I talked about UIDs? So here I'm using a long for my primary key. Let's change this to UID. And if I do that, I also have to fix the getters and setters. So there we go. So now I've upgraded my account class to use UIDs. And I'll do the account repository is also saying it's an account with primary key long. So I have to change this one to UIDs as well. So that's all I have to do in order to run this with Jakarta EE10. So let's just do that before we add any preview features. So and since this was in the Duke tab, I have to install this one again, and then rebuild this one, and then I'll run it. And if I insert I'll just go there. If I insert a Duke here now, you can see red, good. And now it has a UID here as the primary key. So that's how easy it is to use Jakarta EE10 in a Spring Boot application, if you want to. So let's use a preview features as well. This is actually a second preview. It was a preview in 21. But let's use string templates here for this logging statements where I concatenate a string. Let's use a string template here. And I've actually I've cheated a little here. So this one, I just have to. What is it? Did I may have to go to this. No, that's not. It's this one. So just have to get that. For some reason, it won't read my previous stuff. Let's reload the POM. There we go. So I have Java 22, 22, 22, and now it compiles. Yeah, so I just had to reload my POM. So it says account created with ID, and here I can use this string template to just put the stuff I want to have inside the string in this / curly braces thing. So you don't have to use this printf style where percentage 1 and 2 and 3 and the parameters at the end. You just put them wherever you want them in the string. And then it gets merged for you. So if I run this one, and when you run with the, I just have to compile it first. when you run with preview features, you need to remember to enable that in the command. So rather than just java-jar, I have to enable preview. So you can use preview feature in production as well, but don't tell anybody that I told you that you can do that. So. But it's fine. So if I now post you can see red, good. And now you see it's logged twice there because this is the using string template. So this is how you can use 22 preview features with Spring Boot 3 as well. All right. So as you see, Spring Boot has a baseline on Jakarta EE 9, but I just used Jakarta EE 10. And that's because Spring as a framework drags in these implementations more or less by magic. You probably know what's going on, but you probably don't realize which version of Hibernate you're actually getting at this version of Spring. So before you know it, you get the Jakarta EE 11 version of Hibernate. And that's why, and Hibernate is just one example. You remember all the green boxes in Jakarta EE. So, and that's why it actually, if you're a Spring developer, it's very good for you to know what we're doing over here. Because then you know what's coming, and you can start using it. Because some of it is actually very good stuff, like the UIDs, for example. And who knows? Will we do this namespace thing again? You know, if you follow us, you can prevent us from doing it. No, I promise. We won't. We won't do the namespace thing, but we may add some cool stuff that you may want to use in your Spring applications. And they will come from Jakarta 11, which will be released in H1. That is June, July this year. So it's just a couple of months out. We're establishing a fairly steady release cadence with Jakarta EE, trying to get a new version out like 6 to 9 months after an LTS of Java. And Java 21 was September last year, so June, July is like 6 months after. We're adding a Jakarta data specification, and that is a standardization of the repository pattern for data access. And this is exactly what Spring Data does, only that we are a specification. So the implementations will implement it, and Hibernate implements Jakarta data. So when you are using your Spring Boot application and it drags in the next version of Hibernate, you will have 2 data options. You can use Jakarta data, or you can use Spring Data. And Jakarta data actually adds a little stuff outside of Spring Data. It's very tied to in the Hibernate version, it's very tied to Jakarta persistence, or JPA. But it adds a subset of the query language, and it's called Jakarta Data Query Language, where you can do queries in a very nice way in your entity classes. And Jakarta Data is actually also implemented by JNoSQL, which is a implementation of Jakarta NoSQL. Jakarta NoSQL will not be a part of Jakarta 11, but it's a separate specification outside of it. And Eclipse JNoSQL is an implementation of this. So if you drag in JNoSQL in Spring, you can use Jakarta data, and it can go for NoSQL databases as well. I know Spring Data can do that as well, but you have now the option of choosing both. And maybe at some way in the future, these paths will merge somehow. We're also doing a Jakarta RPC specification, which is standardizing gRPC within Jakarta EE. And this is, it hasn't gone very far. We have a very large contribution of code and specification text from Oracle, but we haven't really gotten very far with it from there. So if there are any experts on gRPC here, and you want to make a career and be a hero in open source, this is a good project to start. So just join that mailing list, check out the GitHub, and start talking with them, and see if something happens, because this is an opportunity for you. Jakarta 11 will have its source level based on Java SE 17. That means that all the APIs will be possible to use with Java 17. So you don't have to upgrade to use Jakarta 11. But we will make sure that everything runs with 17 and 21. So 21 are fine. 22 We don't guarantee it, but most likely all of the implementations will run on 22 as well. So you can use 21 features or above, depending on if the implementation supports it or not. So to sum up, you have the Jakarta EE 10 platform, which introduced a lot of updates since Jakarta EE 9. And since spring, it's kind of dragging this in without you actually knowing it, because it comes from the implementations. You probably have a lot of Jakarta EE 10 features available for you in your Spring Boot applications today, even though the baseline is officially Jakarta EE 9. If we look at Jakarta 11, that's coming in June, July, they're also updating a lot of these specifications. And you can see there are updates in persistence, there are updates in validation, there are updates in servlets, and all of these will be available for you in Spring Boot in the near future. So I hope this also kind of is a little bit of an eye-opener to show how Jakarta EE is relevant to Spring, because Spring in very much builds on top of Jakarta EE. And remember this one if you don't remember anything else, and see how interrelated they are. And if nothing else convinced you, then the namespace change in your migrations have probably shown you that Jakarta is a big deal for Spring as well. These are the steps you would usually need to do the Jakarta part of a Spring Boot migration. Like up to the Spring version, the Jakarta versions if you have any fixed imports, repeat for dependency, the transformation, like the Apache Tomcat migration tool or the Eclipse transformer, if you have any transitive dependencies. Properties may be changed, and you may have some dynamic stuff going on. If you want to know more about Jakarta EE and figure out where to find stuff, it's jakarta.ee. It's that simple. And if you want to test it out, you can go to start.jakarta.ee, and you can try it out there. There are multiple blogs going on at an aggregator we have called Jakarta Blogs. If you write a blog or want to have your blog getting more readers, you can blog there as well. It doesn't have to be Jakarta EE stuff. You can blog about Spring, you can blog about Java in general, any tech. If it has some Jakarta somewhere, it's good, but it can be any Java-related blog. And on jakartablogs.ee, it's a very simple instruction for how you can get your blog in there, unlisted. It's just a file GitHub issue with the RSS feed, and you're done. I have my blog there. I write a weekly hashtag Jakarta EE that you can find on Jakarta Blogs and on blogseclipse.org as well, or my own domain. So if you want to have an idea of the pulse of what's going on in Jakarta EE, you can read these hashtags. It's like a 1-minute read every Sunday. And the demo from this application is on my GitHub. It's called Jakarta EE Spring. You can just Google that, I think, and you'll find this one. If you're interested in learning more about Jakarta EE, you can go to LinkedIn and search for Jakarta EE overview. And there's a course, you will get a badge on your profile saying that you know about Jakarta EE. If you ping me on LinkedIn, I can see if I can give you a free link to this course if you don't have a paid subscription by your employer or anything. And at the end, we have the Jakarta EE developer survey. It's opened last week. If you want to fill this one and take a minute of your time, you can just use this QR code or just Google Jakarta EE developer survey and give us some input. It is sort of not really about Jakarta EE. It could be a Eclipse Java developer survey. So it's more about the open source ecosystem around Jakarta EE at Eclipse Foundation. With that, I thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the talk. And we have some time for questions, and I have 3 pairs of these exclusive Jakarta EE anniversary socks. So the 3 first questions will get a pair of socks. All right.
Complex transitive dependencies can it work for?
Okay, so the question is about the tools for transitive dependencies and how complex transitive dependencies they can work for. They can work for anything. It's not about the complexity. It just takes the import statements of the bytecodes and transforms it for you. And the beauty of it is that between Jakarta EE 8 and 9, we didn't do any other changes than the namespace. And that's important. So if those dependencies are on Jakarta EE 8 or Java EE 8 even, it will always work. But if it's if you're in previous version of Jakarta of Java EE, it may have some API differences. If you want to go to a Jakarta EE 10 version of it, there may be API changes. So it will always only take the imports. And it's not limited to the javax to Jakarta namespace. If your company is acquired and you have to change the namespace of all your code, you can run these tools on those as well and just configure which namespace it should change from and to. So they're very advanced. Yeah. Next.
We have started a big migration from Java 8 to 21 and Spring Boot 2 to Spring 3. But we don't have access to these transformation tools. What workaround do you have for us?
Okay, so
we are using Maven exclusion and Maven dependencies, but if you have...
okay, so you do have access to them. They are open source, they're available. You can use them if you want.
In our environment, they are not available if are not validated by the internal rules.
Oh yeah, okay, so that's an internal thing. I guess you would probably have to rely on the open rewrite. They can do lots of stuff for you. And go as far as you can, and then work with your management and see if you can use this tooling somewhere. You don't have to put it in your Maven configuration or in your build system. You can do it on the developer machines as well. So try to get it in. It's open source. It's freely open, free to use. You're free to modify as well if you want to. I think you were there.
What exactly to expect from the course from LinkedIn? The course you mentioned earlier.
Once more.
You said that it's interesting and that it can bring us some information on the profile about Jakarta EE, right?
Okay, the LinkedIn course.
Yes.
The LinkedIn course will give you an overview of Jakarta EE 10. I haven't updated it to, I may update it to Jakarta 11 in the future. Right now it gives you an overview of what Jakarta EE 10 is. So most of the features there, and how to use Jakarta EE 10. If you want to know about what's coming in the next Jakarta EE versions, you probably would need to follow my blog or look at the Jakarta EE webpage and see what's going on there and announcements. And hopefully we can get a LinkedIn course out on that as well.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, any questions without socks? I have stickers. Yeah, in the back. Okay, so the question is when Priora will support 11. My guess is that first the question is that they will support it. When is probably up to them, but usually they are fairly quick. So if Jakarta 11 is released in June, July, I would guess somewhere before Christmas.
And do you have any blog posts to upgrade from, I don't know, Jakarta 9 to Jakarta 9 to Jakarta 10?
So if I have any blog posts about migrating from 9 to 10, that's very easy. It's just to change the version number and it works. All right. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you at the rest of the conference, at the keynote tonight, and tomorrow I'll be here as well. So feel free to approach me if you have any questions or comments, and if you want some stickers, I'll put some here and just come up here. Thank you very much.